Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, I am Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside, and today was a little bit of both. I stalled there a little bit where I said a little bit. I have been delving in pretty deep. I come to realize that I don't take care of that human part of myself as well as I believe I should, that I believe that I deserve. I have taken it for granted, because I'm not somebody who normally suffers with aches and pains. I've never had a headache in my entire life. I've never had a bleeding nose. Super, super grateful, right? And I'm not saying that I'm not without my issues. We all have issues, whether it's mentally, right? Emotionally, physically. But lots of times in our pursuit, in the things that we want in our lives, or sometimes it's in that caring and duty and loyalty that we have within our own group of friends, our family, those people that we hold ourselves accountable to, because we all have bosses. Right? And if we don't have a boss, it's even more important to be our own boss. Not bossy, but I'm saying somebody that we can look to for advice and guidance in that self parenting. And like I said, I don't believe, this is what I'm coming to in my contemplations, in my understandings, and the topics that have been coming across my path, the conversations that I'm having with myself and with others, the things that I'm Googling, that little bit of delving in like a pit bull with a piece of raw meat in my mouth, right? Right? That you just get into these topics. And then to recognize that, oh my goodness, I have been so involved in movement forward for a very long time. It's right. Recognizably for at least 7 years, right? But I believe a lot of that process has been going on underneath the surface, underneath the underground, without my knowledge. And when I say not my knowledge, it's not to say that those currents weren't there for me to pick up. I believe that I've been drumming it into my head that there have been lots of conversations, lots of things that have come across my path in my experience to indicate to me to pay attention a little bit more now. Just give me 1 second here, okay? I just have to empty my air conditioner. It is really, really hot. We've got an orange code warning going on right now. You might notice it's pretty dark in my apartment because it is like dark outside. It's really windy and rainy, and I love the crazy weather. I do love the crazy weather, but we're expected to have a doozy. But who's to say? We've been expecting doozies for 3 days, for 3 days now, and nothing going on. So I'm not getting my hopes up on it, but it would be nice to sit here and enjoy a nice rainstorm and some thunder and lightning. I think the trees and the farm fields could do well by it. but talking about doing well by it. We're going to get back to that conversation. We all have busy lives, right? This is the way society has been built. It's the way that we have been brought up. It is in this time that we're in when we're moving like thousands light years speed into our next stage of evolution where we can actually recognize it. Makes me curious at those other stages of evolution, if it was recognizable back then as to what was going on. I don't think so. It's only because of that access to, you know, documentation that we're able to have in this day and age, this age of AI learning, that we can all be hobby experts. We'll just call it that, hobby experts in our lives, and we can delve into ideas and content, and the small man, like the small man sitting on the couch with his remote control, maybe not the remote control, because as a small man you still have to be a smart man, and not meaning brainy wise, but smart enough to know how to do some Googling, to have that curious mindset, like I said, that pit bull with a piece of raw meat in their mouth, to want to delve into some interesting topics that not everybody's interested in, but you're interested in that, and you get to be a viable expert in the field. I do a lot of Googling. I'm far from being an expert only because I delve into a lot of different, I'm very eclectic, you can tell. And it's not just eclectic in my taste of collectibles and ornaments, but I'm very eclectic in my interest, and that's the truth. And I prioritize because there are topics that are way up there when it comes to my interests. Like I love history, like I really love history, and I find it curious that in this stage of my life and in this stage that this world is in right now, that I am up to here in the Neolithics, right? Into the Neanderthals, in the Homo erectus, and some of those really, really ancient first humanoids. And, for the most part, this is kind of recent studies and understandings that are kind of acceptable in society, because if you are Christian, and a big part of this world's population has a religious aspect about themselves that run in those lines, that we don't think that we have attachments to some of these other humanoids. Now, scientifically, we understand that we most definitely do. Maybe not in all aspects, but in that bloodline, in that lineage going down from one generation to another, we all started way back when, right? We all come from one female, right? That mitochondria just being passed down for tens, hundreds of thousands of years, maybe millions of years. They have just been able to extract DNA from some of these caves off the paint walls, like not out of bones, not out of anything, but in the finger painting on the walls. Now, if you guys are interested in ancient history, you might have heard of these caves in Spain where humans, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals both occupied these caves. And they were very curious about this artwork, and they were actually able to extract DNA from the pigment of the paints. And it turns out these artists were females. Isn't that interesting that they were even able to determine that they were female and that they were Neanderthals? And I find these topics so interesting, but these are new topics that are acceptable for us to take as fact now. Whereas, earlier in our understandings, it would have contradicted with our faiths and our beliefs. Now, I'd just like to get, hello, Tammy. I'd like to get Tammy's opinion on this because Tammy is uh, very much right? She loves Jesus. She's a Christian, right? So I would like your opinion on this, where the science aspect of determining lineage going all the way back to the Neanderthals and Homo erectus and some of those very first humanoids, how you feel how it ties in to your faith now that it's all scientifically confirmed. It's actually fact. Like, for when you look in the Bible, right? The Bible's history goes back saying that mankind's only been around for like 6,000 years. So how do we integrate these understandings of faith and in the Bible and stuff and tie it in with the fact of the science, right? Of what was going on, right? I had my own ideas about it because, things are always changing. And just because Homo erectus was around 400,000 years ago, that doesn't mean that somebody or something else may have entered in to create a new human being that we could actually um, relate to when it comes to faith and the Bible. I find the topics very, very interesting, but I'm kind of getting off the topic and where I wanted to touch base with, in that taking care of the human being, right? Oh, I was talking about being very eclectic in my interests, but not just the ornaments, but in the different topics that I love. But like I said, I prioritize in the importance of them, right? I explore the inside and the outside. So I come from a very dynamic family, and because I understand my purpose comes from my pain, kind of curious that that was how I fell into this, was in that understanding, because in the end my purpose was to take care of myself in a way, to truly understand where, right, understand epigenetics, understand these things that we pass down from one generation to the next. That we live in this age right now that the small man, if they have that interest, that determination, right, that aspect of themselves to delve deep and to take it seriously, that the small man could be that couch expert. I went like this, like the remote control, but the remote control is not a good analogy because, right, when you say couch remote control, you think of somebody that's just not interested in anything except being entertained, right? And nothing in what I do, I don't believe is entertainment. I don't. Even if it is interesting and if I do find it to be entertaining, you know, it's still educational and there's still lessons in that. And, to get back to the idea, right, of paying attention, right? We live in a day and age that the small man can be that expert if they want to in their interest, because all the tools are out there freely. If you're paying your cable bill, right? If you have a phone, I mean, our phone has the same technology, not the exact same, but I'm saying the same capability and take technology, not even going to say that, levels of technology. We'll leave it at that. As when we put the first man on the moon, right? When we put the first man on the moon, each one of us carries this in our pockets, right? Even the babies are being born and going, "Where's my Pixel?" Right? Where's my iPhone? They're being born, and these phones are really expensive to start with, right? Like really expensive. And yet it's become such an integrated part of our lives. And to be able to delve in to topics that we find interesting, that are relatable into our own lives. For me, it was in that idea, your purpose comes from your pain, and I wanted to help people who grew up in dynamic families, and I'm saying that loosely, right? Dynamic families, but you know what I mean. Narcissists and borderlines and empaths. Like, oh my goodness, like all of them. They're just absolutely crazy, and me being empath and also being a codependent in my life, right? And being able to, in my own experiences, learn to survive in a group, in a very dynamic group of all kinds. And maybe that's where that idea came into my head. It takes all kinds to make the world. It's only because in my own experiences growing up, they're curious experiences, right? As families come together and we're mixing with each other, different cultures, different religious ideas, different familial ideas, these aspects of ourselves that we pass down from one generation to the next, that we are all Heinz 57, right? A little bit of this and a little bit of that, right? And it is a deficit, but it's also very much a gift if you can maneuver, if you can navigate those waters, because you're able to mingle and connect with all kinds of people. And I'm very grateful for the gifts that come from those very difficult, sometimes very traumatizing, sometimes very loving and adventurous. Lots of struggles, lots of love, lots of pain, lots of rejection, lots of hairy, scary, but being able to navigate those waters, or say survive those waters, to have that opportunity to understand my purpose comes from my pain, and then to think that I'm going to help others to navigate those waters, delve into that content, and recognize that those lessons are for me, right? Above anybody else. I'm not searching out a career and leaving myself off to the wayside. I've kind of done that as of late with my physicality, but we'll get into that in a few minutes. But, in those emotional aspects of myself, those other parts of me that I've just come to start to understand that, it's always been a partnership, even if I didn't recognize it. And I'm so grateful for the lessons. I'm so grateful for that one understanding that my purpose comes from my pain, because it sent me down some rabbit holes 100%. And, And the idea was it sent me into those rabbit holes, not thinking that I was going to resolve issues for myself because I knew where I came from. I knew the experiences I had. I just thought that, oh, it would be useful, right? If I'm going to be an expert in a topic, an expert in understanding emotions and dynamic relationships within families, that I have to understand these topics and then to be understanding is putting it mildly because I come to recognize that the answers that I most wanted to have resolved in my own life to understand that tripped me up, caused me so many issues emotionally, mentally, physically in my own life was the greatest gift in caregiving that I could have given myself. And I did that. It took me a while. Eventually, it kind of caught on, shadow work and, right, kind of caught on. But when I got into it, I didn't think there was any issues. I thought I had my poop together, right? I was just delving in so I could be an expert in helping other people. But we all know we have to be the example. We have to be the evidence for other people that it can be done. And I had no choice but to delve in deep. But I have been delving deep into the emotions, into the understandings, right? And then in between, because it's so heavy and it's a lot of stuff to digest, a lot of stuff to accept, right? And a lot of work to get back on a proper track rather than the track that I was on. But that was only in my mentality, that was only in my relationships with myself, not my physicality. I kind of put that off to the wayside. So before we go into that, let's just see what Tammy's got to say here. She answered my question. Yes, I agree with the Bible 100%. I believe there could have been more out there somewhere else, out there somewheres. But you were separate from that, a separate species then, right? What you're saying is God's children, God's chosen, right? That's what you're saying. You're saying there just another aspect, another branch, right? Okay, I get it. And those babies, 1 and 2 year olds, Cindy, they know how to maneuver these cell phones. And I observe them in grocery stores and restaurants and videos. Those babies are grabbing and crying for the phones. I get you, Tammy, right? You know, when I was a kid, when me and you were kids, it was like the TV was our babysitter, right? Because the parents were just too busy involved in their own lives that they didn't have a lot of time. We were the first generation there where we didn't, right? Where we just kind of left to our own demise. I always refer to myself as a feral child, which I totally relate to in my life. But you're 100% right, Tammy. Now it's not the TV, right? The kids are being babysat by their phones, right? They're being babysat by the video games. This way they can't get in trouble, right? These are self-involved games where they don't have to worry about their kids running out onto the street, that they're glued to the screen of their monitor or their TVs or their phones, right? Um, but I have believed through the years now with the science and the proofs. Yeah, I think it's a branch. You know, it does take all kinds to make the world. I truly believe that. And in my delving in, to a lot of different aspects of my understandings, there is no doubt in my mind that we are meant to diverge. We are meant to assimilate, right? We are this synthesis of what I said before, the Heinz 57, where we're all a little bit of mix of everything, but things being passed down from one generation to another in those familial, cultural and religious ideas, the clashes, and how do we integrate that into our systems to our own beliefs and our own understandings, or staying within our chosen understanding, but being able to expand, like you just said, in being able to take in the science and the medicine and, right, the space age and AI learning that's going on. We are moving so fast. We are moving so fast in our evolution that we are actually being spectators in that evolution. Like it's an experience that we are experiencing in the moment, and it's not going to take that process of Neanderthals going extinct, and Homo sapiens being the primary human beings, that process took thousands and thousands and thousands of years, but we didn't have the mentality for that. We didn't understand what was going on, right? We had no idea. I bet you for thousands of years when the babies were born without their tails, right? They were probably considered disabled, right? Handicapped, something wrong with them because they were so physically different. And then of course our hands and our feet changed in that process. And here in this day and age that we live in right now, where men are bald, right? For me, for myself, I totally get it, because we don't need that hair anymore, right? We don't need to be hairy beasts anymore because we wear clothing to protect ourselves, and because, well, we're moving into global warming now, that all that hair is probably not very healthy for us. And it makes sense that we are losing hair. Even women are losing their bodily hair now, right? And I attribute that to our next stage of evolution. Now, that's been going on for thousands of years, right? That's the physicality part of it is slow moving, right? It's slow changes, because if you remember the Neanderthals and their great big bones up in their eyebrows, right? I would think that in my family, in our features and in our physicalities, I would assume that we got a high percentage of Neanderthal going on in us, right? They say that everybody has between 2 and 6%, depending where you live in the world, of Neanderthal. Most of us have between 2 and 3% Neanderthal genes in us, which is so fascinating, right? So fascinating. And that the strength that comes from the Neanderthals. There are a few aspects of Neanderthals that they've been able to attribute to our Neanderthal genes, like heart issues, right? We really haven't gotten the strength in our hearts that the Homo sapiens have. So, if you have heart issues, there could be a tendency that we're more relatable to the Neanderthal aspects, these little aspects of genes that are passed down through the generations. But that's the part of the assimilation. That's part of that synthesis of us all coming together. And it kind of makes me wonder, right? When is the physicality? Because our brains are going crazy, aren't they? We are getting so smart. And even the small man has the resources out there to be, if they want to be, just as smart as some of the really top experts in some of these fields that, right? That you can't even pronounce the words because you need a dictionary to understand even what the word means. But as a small man, we have that opportunity if we have that interest and that consistency to apply ourselves in that, in our interest, right? But lots of times we live in a busy world that we spread ourselves really thin. And I get it. I do that myself. Like I said, I'm very specific and I'm a little bit of a pit bull with a piece of raw meat on myself with those topics that are important to me, right? Like understanding emotions, dynamic families, trauma, complex trauma. That's where I am. But I dabble in other aspects because my purpose does come from my pain. I want to understand my pain. I want to understand because it's not just me. In order to understand me, I have to understand my siblings. I have to understand my parents. I have to understand my great grandparents and however far back I can get. And we don't really keep tabs on any of that. Of course, we have those DNA tests that we can do, which is extremely helpful, but that's just all information for somebody else to keep tabs on us, right? I would love to have my DNA tested, see how much Neanderthal I have in me. I bet you I'd be on the higher spectrum. I bet you I would have probably, I would think about 5 or 6% Neanderthal in me going on. Yeah, and they say the blue eyes, it's possible that the blue eyes came from the Neanderthals too, right? Because they were the ones that were occupying um, Northern Europe during the Ice Age, and they would have spent a lot of time in their caves, and they didn't need to have that dark pigment to protect their eyes from the sun because there wasn't a lot of sun going on, right? But like I said, I'm not an expert in that field, but I have interest and I dabble enough to get myself in a conversation, enough to ask myself these questions, right? That I'm able to expand on that and then go in to Gemini and ask Gemini questions, and then it takes me down um, a rabbit hole, right? Now, before I get back into the topic, and we will get into the physicality part of it. Um, uh, I have opened myself in the last 20 years to be accepting more than my beliefs, Cindy. I always say, Cindy, that my cousins are the monkeys and I need to go to the zoos to visit them. That is a great analogy. Tammy, that's a fantastic analogy and so true, right? Because not everybody's expanding at the same rate, if at all, right? It's in our evolution that we get to decide whether to move forward. If you didn't come in and we didn't have these conversations and stuff all the time, right? And I'm sure you're in other platforms and stuff expanding on your own, that and in your own life experiences, you're expanding if you're paying attention, if you're interesting. But lots of people, right? They're stuck to their phones. They're stuck to their monitors and computers. And I'm on computer too, but I'm using it as a tool. Ooh, I just saw lightning out of the corner of my eye. So excited. Maybe I'll get that thunderstorm or lightning storm tonight after all. Um, Oh, you have the blue eyes too. Oh my goodness. That comes from one woman. That mitochondria comes from one woman. And that woman was it 60,000 or 6,000 years ago? Ugh, I'm trying to think now, right? But it's passed down, and it's passed down from actually one woman. They've determined that scientifically. Though through evolution, I always say we come from monkeys and we look like monkeys too, right? We look like monkeys. And I guess, that whoever's in charge of what's going on in this world, that necessity that we need to move forward, like our evolution is starting now and we are all spectators. But not only are we spectators, but because it's our evolution, that we're participants in it too, and it's scary, right? And the physicality aspect of it is, I don't see it going on too much except for the baldness going on in men, but I'm sure, right, that it is in this idea that we made it to this age of AI learning, that if we choose to move forward in our evolution, we have that opportunity to, by delving in. And maybe that was the idea. There was a point there. Remember, they said the world was going to end at 2012, right? Remember that? It was a big hoopla. Everybody was all ready to leave the world. A big meteor was coming. They didn't even know what was going on. They just thought it was the end of the world in 2012. And here we are, 2026, and we're still here. But in my mind, I'm saying we made it, because in 2012, the age of AI learning was barely starting. Like, oh my goodness, I remember 2012. I was on the computer then, but I was nowheres near into delving into the topics that I'm delving into now. We were not technically inclined like we are now. We might have had some flip phones or those phones with the big antennas that that we used, right? But it was just all starting then. If we got pushed in as far as 2026, and like you said, Tammy, the babies, right? They're so smart with their phones. They're so involved in technology, in AI now, that maybe that's what whoever's in charge needed us to be at, so that we could actually understand what's going on right now when it comes to evolution. We are just moving so fast because AI has made it possible for us to connect with each other, number one, right? To delve into topics that we didn't have the resources to be able to do before, but now with computers and technology and being able to communicate with each other from across the world, and be able to want to communicate with people who are different than us, that we become more accepting, that that we're not the only ones that are moving forward, that people are moving forward all over this world. It's pretty incredible. Okay, let's get back into that conversation that I wanted to talk about. But I've been delving into it, right? And I've been delving into it for a very long time now, over 7 years that I understand, right? And then probably a few more years before then without me really understanding what was going on, right? I was kind of in the background, totally clueless, but it was enough to finally get me to the point where I was able to grasp on to an idea that led me to the next idea and the next idea to the next idea, to the point where I'm able to come in here and understand that, you know, purpose comes from your pain, and to be able to have all those resources as a small man at my fingertips, that it has brought me to the point where I might no longer consider myself a small man. But in some aspects, I have to say, because I've been physically neglecting myself in that process, right? I've been delving deep emotionally. And, when I talk about, you know, wanting to work in trauma and to work in dynamic families and upbringings and, how our emotions work, we have to understand it gets tied up in that physical aspect of ourselves that we neglect until we recognize that we have issues, right? But in saying that, I have to say again, with the tools that as a small man, we can be our own experts. I'm not saying to self diagnose. Right? The experts are the experts. That's their profession. That's right. When I say I explore the inside and the outside, but there is somebody there who just takes care of that physicality of us. And I got a big wake up call a couple of weeks ago when I went to see a doctor for the first time and I don't know how long. Whenever I got hurt or I didn't feel good, I would just go to a walking clinic, right? Because I just considered myself to be in such great health. And it turned out not to be. Well, I'm not going to say, like, right, I don't want to turn something small into something big, right? But it did wake up my eyes, or sorry, it did wake me up to that idea that I have not been taking care of my physical aspects of myself in dietary fashion. There have been aspects that I have been doing much better with my connection to being outside with mother nature in the fresh air with the trees with the camping and doing the trails, right? I have been doing better that way, and that's might have contributed to that little bit of getting me to that point, right? Just like this digital age got us to the point that we can understand a little bit of what's going on as it concerns our evolution and how fast it's going and how it's turning us all into crazy town. But sometimes it's just knowing what's going on that helps to calm our systems down, right? That's not the case when it comes to your physicality because, you go at the symptoms and it could be 100 different diagnoses from something so simple to not eating enough apples to not taking your vitamins properly, or you could be like seriously have underlying illnesses that you don't know about. So it takes you again on a roller coaster. It's just the idea that it wakes us up to understand that, the human matters, right? That, so many people out there doing what they're doing and they treat themselves badly, they treat others badly, and they're so unconcerned with the physicality of it. And it's the most important aspect. We couldn't do anything that we're doing without this, right? Without the appreciation, without the good health to be able to physically be able to do it. And I needed that wake up call. So now I'm in a process of really getting woke up to it, right? Because I've been doing blood tests, getting mammograms, and I'm on my iron pills. I've been high dosing on my vitamins, and I'm going to be cutting back on my vitamins to just um, focus on maybe eating better, right? Because the issues that I have are related to a gastric bypass that I had in the late 80s, that I'm not getting enough nutrients and all kinds of right things going on because of my bad eating. If you can't eat a lot, the things that you should be what you should be eating, right? Don't fill that space up with junk. I'm on my second week of not being on artificial sweeteners for the operation that I had, gastric bypass. It was to lose weight. If you guys don't know, I was 311 pounds at my heaviest. Food has always been one of my coping mechanisms, one of my main coping mechanisms. And, I have been off and on in taking care of that aspect of myself. But since I've been delving in to working in emotions, right? And to this wake up call in that movement, I think that we're being pushed into for our own betterment, that physical part of us has to catch up too, because that can't happen without this, right? And I needed that wake up call. So I'm going to be paying a very close attention. I'm going to follow the directives of my new doctor, super smart. She already caught the fact that I was iron deficient and I needed to take more iron, and also in delving in, right? Once I heard that I was iron deficient, I really delved into my diet, my eating habits, and I'm the first one to admit, right? I love my pink ice donuts with the sprinkles, right? I love ice cream, and I'm lactose intolerant, right? I shouldn't be eating ice cream, but I do it anyway because this is a coping mechanism that I have not let go of. It's my very last one. I'm I'm very optimistic. I'm thinking right now if there are others, right? But I've had so many coping mechanisms, and I'm so grateful that through that little bit of movement and those lessons that have come across my path and those conversations and those experts and this age of AI learning for Gemini and YouTube and Google. Oh my goodness, on all those topics that I delve in, not so much that I'm driving myself crazy because I take my mentality serious. If I ever thought that I was going off the deep end in it in any way, I would take a break or I would eliminate it completely. But because it's so tied into, right, uh, that progress that I've done in myself, that I don't think that I could go backwards in any way because, well, it wouldn't be beneficial to me, right? In any way, because my purpose comes from my pain. I have goals, I have dreams, and I'm moving forward, and I'm so grateful those goals and dreams were so beneficial for myself also, and I had no clue that it was going to be, right? For me, I was just concerned about putting the roof over my head. And because that's where my expertise was, well, that's where I was going to delve in, but I wasn't as smart as I thought I was, right? And I've been at it now for years and years and years. And in those years and years and years, I've come to appreciate myself, right? But not so much that I recognize that my physicality was sacrificed for that process. And there's no, that just blows me away, because especially when I work in, emotions, that sacrificing yourself is the absolute worst thing that you could possibly do. I'm grateful for the lessons that come across my path. It's better late than never. And I understand, we all fail, right? In our lives, and we learn lessons through those failures. But I feel so bad, right? That, could I have done some serious damage to myself because I left myself to the wayside, because I didn't take the human into consideration, that in those examples in my life, within my own family, that I didn't pay attention. I just kept saying, my affirmations. I'm so grateful for my good health, and just trust that everything was going good without getting that confirmation from experts. Because if I had known, if I had known that I was causing myself issues, right? I knew I had coping mechanisms. I knew I loved my treats. I knew that I was putting too much sweeteners in my coffee. And yes, I'm back to regular sugar in my coffee, but I'm not taking a lot, and I've cut back in the amount of coffee that I'm drinking too. Let's have a sip. I make a good cup of coffee. I like my coffee. Maybe that's something even going to have to eliminate. In the moment, I do baby steps. And you guys who hang out with me, I believe in baby steps 100%, because I would not have gotten this far if I hadn't done baby steps in it, because it's so big, right? It's so overwhelmingly big. Like, somebody who just delved into it head first would quit within a week, because it would be just too much. It would be too much, right? You wouldn't be able to understand it. You wouldn't be able to believe it. You wouldn't be able to cope, even sometimes, to accept the work that you have to do within yourself. Because if you came into it like I did, I thought I was good, right? I thought I was good. Yeah, I had no idea what shadow work was. But the only way I could get it done, right? Because this is what I felt, that this is where my expertise, my personal expertise in my own life. But to be able to really understand where I went wrong, where my parents went wrong, where my grandparents went wrong, but where we also got it right, because we were so diverse in our family. Like I said, borderlines and narcissists and codependents and empaths, and oh, I could go on. I could go on and on. And to be able to come out of that with a semblance of, I'm just going to say, understanding of it all, right? And be grateful that I managed to get through those experiences, because a lot of people don't. I see these people out on the street all hunched over on fentanyl, right? So grateful I didn't go down that route, because that's a difficult coping mechanism. Alcohol was never my thing. Not to say I never touched alcohol, but it was never my thing, right? But oh my goodness, that coping mechanism that people have, like, that's devastating. How can you make any movement for yourself when you're not mentally there, right? Because you're so into that. I understand that, because another coping mechanisms, again, grateful that I was able to shed that out of my life, was I was a gambling addict. This age of AI, right? This digital age, they came right into the bars, those slot machines, right? They're just not the casinos anymore. They're absolutely everywheres. And I got hooked bad, so bad that it destroyed my marriage. And when it destroyed my marriage, It destroyed me for a very long time, right? But I had to delve into all of that too to understand that aspect of myself and where it was coming and how I was getting out of it. And then to be able to shed another coping mechanism. I've been shedding coping mechanisms for decades now, right? Oh my goodness, like so many. But the pink ice donuts with the sprinkle, that's the one that's causing me problems right now. That I'm not able to let go of those foods that aren't good for me, that I'm still in the treats. And that's something that, it's never too late than never. And so now, in baby steps, because this is the last one, I let go of this one. I've got no lifesavers. All I have is my YouTube, right? This is my last of my coping mechanisms, and this one is a healthy coping mechanism, right? This is serving me and this is serving others. So it's important and it's beneficial and it's not going anywhere. So grateful, grateful. And of course, bringing in some other healthy coping mechanisms into my life. Grateful for those. But this big one of not eating well, it's causing me issues, right? And it's an unkindness to myself. I look at it that way because that was reward and punishment when I was a kid. That's why it's my biggest coping mechanism right now. It's the one that's the hardest one for me to let go because as a child, food was reward and punishment in my upbringing. And so I have a serious attachment and I have triggers within that. But in working on the inside, right, and in understanding emotions and in trauma, that's the next step for me in those baby steps. And I'm going to do it in baby steps. I'm cutting back on the coffee, I'm getting rid of the artificial sweeteners. I'm going to have a boiled egg every morning to get that protein and that iron into me right off the hop because a boiled egg will digest very, very easily. I'm going to follow my doctor's directives. Whatever test she wants to send me on, I'm going to do it without questioning. I'm going to follow her advice in it because so far it's only been a few weeks and already so much benefit. Just the idea that I recognize in my physicality that I have been very neglectful. And then I have to be honest in that too. I believe probably I've known I've been very neglectful in that for a very long time because, you know, nothing easier for me than to be able to sit here and sit in workshops and to take in perspectives and sit on lessons and lectures that I'm able to sit here and nobody can see me. I'm just right, and I could just eat whatever I want in that. And so it helps me to think and it helps me to stay present, right? That it doesn't become torture. So I've been kind of utilizing it as a tool in what I'm doing. But if I truly want to be the expert, if I want to be the example to others, if I want to be the evidence to others, that's the direction that I'm moving in now, right? In that physicality. And it's going to be in those baby steps and it's going to be in finding rewards for myself because I have to give myself rewards because I was brought up on reward and punishment, right? In all aspects of my childhood, not just with food. So reward and punishment was big. But if I'm going to do this, right? I was going to say do this to myself because again, this is how I feel that I'm punishing myself by saying, no, Cindy, you can't have that pink ice donuts with the sprinkle, right? No, Cindy, you can't have pop. You can't have the ice cream, right? You have to take your vitamins. But that's what self-parenting is all about, right? And for people who never had that proper parenting when we were kids, that it's important that we pick up those skills for ourselves. And even though we have those skills, because we do it for other people, we divvy it out for other people. But like I said, we put ourselves, right? We sacrifice ourselves and we put ourselves off to the wayside in order to meet our goals and our dreams, right? Even recognizing that we're doing ourselves a little bit of a disservice. But it is in that idea that I have to find ways to not trick myself because I can't be tricked anymore, right? I can't trick myself in that. Myself will know that, well, it's not going to know, it's going to feel that it's being punished, that it doesn't get its yum yums. But you know what? There are lots of ways and lots of things out there that are healthy and enjoyable. And the fact that I'm going to feel better, right? That I'm setting myself up for my retirement, that I can be that 80, 90-year-old woman, 100-year-old woman. I'm reaching for 114 years old, you guys. I say it all the time in my affirmations. 114. But if I could be physically active till I'm 90 years old, I would be so happy, right? Not to have walkers and wheelchairs, to still be able to get out there and go for walks. That would be so amazing, right? And to be able to truly say that, you know, I worked in the inside and the outside, that I accomplished everything that I set out to do, that I overcame all my unhealthy coping mechanisms. This is going to be the last one, you guys. The last one, and I had a lot of them, a lot of bad ones too, right? And a lot of those bad ones were about food, right? The pica where I crunched ice and I ruined my teeth and I had to spend so much money just to keep a nice set of teeth going on, right? And that came directly from not taking in enough iron. So this is not a new problem. This was a problem once I resolved. I totally forgot about it and went back to my old ways, right? And in that, applying myself in the lessons and keeping myself seated here, taking in the lessons, not missing out, which is beneficial, which is right. I'm saying it served in the moment, it saved my life, okay? In the moment, it saved my life. But now it's time for me to take the reins and to pay attention to my physical well-being. So I just wanted to say that. So if you guys see me talking about, my eating habits and what I'm doing in my life and that concern, because again, I want to be that example, that evidence to other people that it can be done. Maybe I'll lose 20 pounds. I don't want to lose too much weight. I am happy with my weight. For me, when I see people really, really skinny, that's not a sign of good health. To me, this looks healthy, right? To me, this looks healthy. And so I wouldn't want to go much lower than what I'm at, 20 pounds at the very most, and then just maintain that weight in a healthy way with my walks and right, drinking better fluids, drinking more fluids, keeping an eye on those nutrients and on those iron levels and in my blood pressure levels so that I can be that 90-year-old that's going for walks, walking down trails, right? Doing my provincial parks. That would be so, so amazing. Yeah. I mean, this is comfy. I can do this too, right? So my brand is set up to suit whoever I am and whatever I'm doing. in the moment, right? I consider myself a vlogger. So, this is part of my real life that I've kind of introduced into my brand of exploring the inside and the outside. But there's going to come a time, right? I plan on spending a great deal of my retirement out on the road, right? Doing provincial parks and doing my Google Map reviews. And yeah, I just really, really am optimistic that I will tie it all together. But I do it in baby steps, and it has worked for me tremendously. And if I could get this one thing done, right, and do it in a way where it doesn't feel like I'm punishing myself, that I'm not taking away one of the joys of my life, because I feel, right? Who doesn't like good food, right? Who doesn't love good food? But they should be special treats. And, I also understand being low income, we think in volume and we don't think in quality. So I got to do a little bit of switcheroo in that too, and not be so stingy with my money, that I should be out there and spending money on good quality meats and healthy fruits and vegetables, right? And that would feel like treats, because that's not a lot of stuff that I spend my money on, because I'm looking at volume, right? That idea when my dad had a bad poker day and he'd come home from his poker game with a 25-pound bag of rice on his shoulder, right? That we knew that he had a bad poker day, and that for the next month we would be eating rice every day. This is the mentality that I have, and I don't think that's really good. And it's not healthy just to live on rice every single day for a month, right? So I want my life to be enjoyable in all aspects, right? So even the food has got to be enjoyable. There just might not be any pink ice donuts with sprinkles, but maybe there'll be a good substitute in that. Okay, let's just come into the comments, and then I'm going to grab my card, it's my coffee, and then we're going to call it a night. Got a workshop to do tomorrow, so I want to make some notes and stuff before I go into the workshop. I'm just going to be a spectator and a student. Um, One of my favorite creators putting out something uh, that it doesn't cost any money. So I'm in that position that I'm able to get in there, and I hope he doesn't mind, because he really works with some big people who make 7, 8 figures, right? So I hope he doesn't mind that Cindy is going to be sitting in. I'll be a student in that. Okay. Cindy, I do remember Y2K in that year 2012. It was a big deal. I lived in Texas then. The world, the state, and the local wise, the people were scared and terrified and wondering what was going to happen, right? And nothing happened. But like I said, maybe it just got pushed ahead because there was that opportunity for us to get into this age of AI learning, where we could actually better be drawn into understanding a little bit better. That somehow we made it across some kind of finish line that we needed to get to in order to get to our next stage of evolution. This is the way that I'm thinking, right? As a pretty good possibility as to what happened, right? Yeah. Cindy, I think you look great and are doing good health wise, that I can see and absorb. I appreciate that you say that, Tammy, right? But sometimes the inside doesn't look like the outside, right? I got myself pretty iron deficient, right? My doctor said I was pretty iron deficient. She made sure that I'm on my iron pills now. And she's getting all kinds of tests done. But being a new doctor, she wants to know where I stand health wise. So we're starting off with a clean sheet. So she wants me to go and get all these tests done so she knows exactly where I am. And when she said it concerned to my blood test, yes, everything looked really good on the blood test except for that one aspect of my iron was super low. Um, Cindy, take a good break to get something to drink. Oh yeah, let's have my juice too. That's another thing. Lots of fluids. I'm just going to take in lots and lots of fluids, right? But I'm doing it in baby steps. I'm still not good. I had muffins today, right? So I'm not perfect, but even in the past 2 weeks, I have made some significant changes. So we'll see. I even had salad a couple of times this week, and I'm not a salad girl. Yeah. Uh, Nowadays, Cindy, it is hard to find good doctors, and I'm so glad and happy for you that you found a good doctor. That your doctor came to your pathway. Yeah, I'm very grateful. And, I was just going for a walk, right? And I walked down, they built a new medical office, and I was going for a walk, and I just said, oh, just Cindy, go in and see if you can get an appointment to see if they're taking new clients, right? And it was a new building, so I thought maybe they might be taking new clients. And I walked in, beautiful doctor's office, of course, because it's brand new. It's in a high rise and everything. It was just beautiful, right? And this doctor just actually moved from Vancouver, where I was born, and she's East Indian. Oh, she corrected me. She said South Indian, um, but she has aspects of spirituality about her. So I really appreciate that because I had my last family doctor um, was that way also, and so he didn't like to give a lot of prescriptions and stuff because he believed in meditation and he believed in going for walks and stuff. He was the one that got me connected with Mother Nature. Well, my dad got me connected with Mother Nature, but he reconnected me to Mother Nature and being on the outdoors and exercising and non-impact exercising to boot, right? I don't believe in high impact exercise, the weightlifting and the running and jogging. Right, that's not unless that's your expert. I just think that just breaks down the body really hard. I believe in walking and hiking and riding bike and swimming. These are low impact exercises, and those are the kind of exercises that I like to do. Um, I understand, Cindy. I'm the same. There are things that I would love to eat or drink, but I can't because for X, if I eat chocolate, I will get a 3 day severe migraine. I stay away from it. I haven't eaten candy in over 20 years. I had to give up candy because it was a downfall. I forget about that one. You guys, it's another one. Thank you, Tammy, for reminding me of that one. I never mentioned that one. But I've given up candy for over 20 years. I don't buy chocolate bars. Oh my goodness, I was so in love with jujubes and those fruit candies with the sugar on them. Oh, absolutely every day I ate candy, right? And even if I haven't given up the cookies or the potato chips, just giving up the candy made a big difference in my life. Thank you for reminding me of the not that one. That was a coping mechanism in those baby steps. Sometimes you just can't eliminate everything at the same time, but you can do little things that you can eliminate in the moment, right? Like, I gave up bread for over 2 years. I didn't do any bread at all. I made it up like I could do crackers and fancy bread, seed breads and stuff, but like white processed bread and stuff, I gave that completely up for over 2 years. I didn't see a big difference in my life because of that, except for the fact that because I wasn't eating that kind of bread, I wasn't eating the peanut butter. And there's a lot of lectins in peanut butter, and I eat a lot of peanut butter. But now recognizing because of my iron deficiency, right? Lots of time the body screams for what it wants, and I looked at the peanut butter, and one of the elements of peanut butter is iron. So it wasn't the peanut butter that my body was screaming for, it was the iron in the peanut butter that my body was screaming for. But peanuts are lectins, and too many lectins in my body is part of the problem, right? Yeah. Uh I'm proud of your baby step changes, Cindy, with your foods and drinks and diet. That isn't easy, but you're doing it. Congrats. Yeah, I am doing it. I have to appreciate how far I have come, considering at one time I was 311 pounds. But again, growing up in that reward and punishment, it's hard one for me, and it's my last coping mechanism. And then I could say I have no addictions, right? I have no addictions. That would be absolutely amazing to say that I have overcome all of those. But in the moment, I can't say that because, yeah, it's still a coping mechanism for me. But, right, I am trying, I am doing the baby steps. And in this wake up call, right? And sometimes that's what we need in our lives is those hiccups and those wrenches thrown into our lives so that we can just focus on really what we should be focusing on in treating ourselves, right? You guys hear myself all the time. Treat yourself like you matter, and the physicality. Oh my goodness, that's the biggest part of it in treating ourselves like we matter, and yet we turn into broken old men by the time we're 30 because we're doing all this heavy construction work and lifting and football and right, and then with the women, we're so busy taking care of everybody that emotionally, physically, mentally, that we're not taking care of ourselves. So if I can manage to do this one, it's going to be a big part of my topics and discussion in talking about making sure that we understand that we matter, right? But I have to be the example in that. So I'm going to do it, but I've got to find ways to reward myself in that, right? So it doesn't feel like I'm treating myself badly, that I'm punishing myself, because I understand that's how I'm going to take it, right? It's just the way that I was brought up. Sending a quick cheer, you heard the siren? I missed it again. I was in that flow, Tammy. I missed it again. Thank you for sending out the good cheer. Uh, that's a great milestone too, Cindy. There, Cindy with the candy eliminations. Great job there. Yeah, the candy was a good one. The candy was a hard one. The candy was a hard one. I was really dependent on the candy. The only downfall was at Christmas, right? My sisters would always sabotage at Christmas because I would like the licorice candies, um, the layered licorice candies, and quality quality street chocolates. So at Christmas time, those were always in my stocking. So I always said that I had to eat them by the end of Boxing Day. But that's a lot of candy to eat within 24 hours of receiving your Christmas presents. And so I would always be sick and super wiry, because of all that sugar that I was not used to. But I'm just going to make sure that this Christmas everybody understands no candy at Christmas time either, right? That we're coming off of candy 100%. Yeah, but I did good with the candy. I recognize I did good with the candy. Okay, you guys. I just haven't done with the comments. Before there are any more comments I got to pay attention to, let's get into a word. for 54 powerful words. Sometimes the word that I pick is relevant to the conversation. Sometimes it isn't, but I always do it at the end of my live show. And so in my thumbnail, when you guys see that I the word of the day, just keep in mind that sometimes it's not integrated from the beginning of my conversation to the end, but quite often it is something that is uh, able to be tied into it. Okay, you guys, let's go. Grab, let's grab a card here. This one wants to come out, so this is the one we're going to take. The word today is thoughtfulness is remembered. This is, I'm trying to think, it was the first thing that comes across my mind. So I'm going to just go with that, in that thoughtfulness, in that caring for other people's. I know in this moment and in this live, we're talking about that thoughtfulness to ourselves, right? But because I got here is remembered, the first thing that triggered in my mind, in those kindnesses that we give to others. It is so important. Lots of times we think, well, what can we give? What can we do? Well, we can give our time. We can give a shoulder to cry on. We can give our ears and sit in on a conversation with people. Sometimes we get so focused within our own lives, guilty, right? I'm on a mission, right? But part of my mission is in coming in here and giving back, because it is that idea that sometimes we don't have the resources. My dream is to one day be a philanthropist and to, do renovation on old Carnegie libraries, and to maybe make some Bible camps for the little kids who do come from dynamic families, where they can come outside for a couple of weeks outside their household and be able to get some, right, a little bit of examples in their life to understand. Because when I was growing up, those examples in my life were only recognizable because of the few friends that I had. When I went over to their homes and I saw how their family lived and how their parents treated them and stuff, and that love and that attention. And even though I got lots of love and attention from my father, you know, totally different story when it came to my mother. My mother and father came from two different extremes, right? But every little girl needs to be feeling like they're loved and cared for by their mother. And I didn't get that. And I became, when I talked about dynamic families, I was that codependent where, I looked towards my father for that love and that attention. And he was trying to create the best life for himself as he possibly could. And even though he loved spending time with me, right, there wasn't just me in that household. It had to be spread around, right, and not necessarily evenly. And also to understand in that, in my codependence with my father, it was a safety issue, prioritized, right? But that would have agitated my mother a great deal too. But to get back to this world, thoughtfulness is remembered. It is in that idea that everybody has something they can contribute. There is no excuse. You don't need the big bucks. I might not ever be able to put new roofs on the decaying Carnegie libraries. I might not ever be able to do that. I might not ever be able to create a Bible camp for little kids, right? You know, but it could still be a dream and a passion and a goal set forth in those baby steps that we take and just moving forward. But in the meantime, in that little drummer girl idea, that little drummer boy idea, where you feel that you don't have the resources or the tools or the time, that you can make that time, right? You can offer up in your own creativity, in those ideas, that sometimes somebody just needs to talk, somebody just needs to feel like they matter, right? Somebody needs just to be able to have a good cry and know that it's okay. And if you can be that person, if you can be that little drummer girl that has nothing to offer but offer that, it would be remembered. Oh my goodness, it would be remembered. And remember, everybody has a gift. And it's not that idea, I give you this and you give me that. But sometimes when things are remembered, it comes back tenfold, right? Because people do remember that time you took for them, those moments when they didn't have anybody or anything, and you gave them the last few cents in your pocket, or you sat down with them for an hour and listened to their woes and kept them company in that. And they remember that. And then you find yourself in your own situation where you're feeling down and out, where you're in a slump or you have a problem. And just in that returned kindness, because you do get what you give. You do, right? It's not always coming from the source that you had given to, but it does find its way to you. So, in that thoughtfulness that you've done for somebody else, you have to trust that in your time of need, it's going to find a way to reconcile in your life too. And that's the truth. Thoughtfulness is remembered, right? It truly is. Okay, you guys. Hi, Eugene. Thoughtfulness. Thank you, Tabby. I appreciate that. You guys, thank you so much for coming into my live tonight. I really appreciate the company in that. We'll see how this goes. I'm determined. When I'm set on something, it happens. But like I said, I'm a big believer in baby steps. I'm not beating myself up because I'm not getting it done yesterday, but I'm making that movement. The thought comes in the moment, you take the action on that. You do one small thing to prove to yourself that you can do it, that you will do it. Like I said, it doesn't have to be done yesterday, but we do have to get cracking. Why? Because we're moving in our evolution. You guys, have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.